Broadcasting off of the MTV Communications satellite from the abandoned Long John Silver's behind the abandoned Pizza Hut on Center Avenue in Bay City, Michigan. It's Everything, Anything, and Nothing Really, with your hosts Eric Walensky and Matthew Maynard. Good evening, folks. My name's Eric.
My name is Matt.
And good evening to you, Matt.
Hey, Eric. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good, but we got to do some backtracking this week.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd call it a retraction or a revision or an update, but I've got a little more information on that little Madonna blurb we mentioned a few episodes ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We were talking about how years ago Madonna referred to her birthplace of Bay City, Michigan as a smelly little town.
Exactly. And this quote came out in 1987. I would have been roughly 10 years old. And the full context of this quote was never relayed to me because I think everybody in Michigan just got very angry when she referred to Bay City that way. And me, just listening to my parents and teachers, I was probably just told, well, Madonna thinks this is a smelly little town, and that's all you need to know.
They hid the truth from us.
All this time.
Yeah.
The full content of that interview, Madonna does refer to Bay City as a smelly little town. However, she goes on to say, when pressed by the interviewer, that she has great affection for Bay City, and she literally meant that Bay City smelled because her house was next to a petroleum plant.
Of course, yes.
Again, being 10 years old and not have been familiar with the petroleum plant back then, I assume she referred to the sugar beet smell, which also covers this great little city of ours.
Yeah, there are a lot of smells that it could have been narrowed down to. It's hard to tell what she was smelling.
Exactly. The point ultimately, though, is she literally meant there is a smell to the town, not that the town's a dumpy little smelly place.
And that's just fact, folks.
Exactly. That's just facts.
There's nobody in Bay City that's going to argue that with you.
So I wanted to correct that, give the rest of the story, because it did seem like I was like the rest of the world back then, like, oh, she thinks Bay City stinks. No, it literally did stink.
And to this day, you'll see what she meant.
Yes. I want to make that correction and apologize to Madonna for not fully quoting her on that interview. And I also want to make a plea to her and say, Madonna, if you're listening, the petroleum plant is gone. It only smells like sugar beets here now. Please come back. Please bring bridge money. Not just enough for tolls, like enough to buy the bridges, please.
To paraphrase the entire city council, Madonna, save our bridges.
Whatever kind of apology you need from everybody not reading the full interview back in 1987, we'll give it to you. Just fix these bridges, please.
We've been sitting here waiting for you for all these years.
Yeah, it's as soon as I read that full interview, I had to get that off my chest. I had to make that plea, and I felt it was worth the revisit.
Well, I have a revisit as well.
Oh, you do?
I do. Last week, remember, we talked about the barber from Owosso, Karl Manke, who was angry because the governor was not his mother or something, and I may have that wrong. No, in defiance of the governor's order, he said he was going to keep his barber shop open until Jesus walked in, which apparently hasn't happened yet. So the plot has thickened. It's gotten really serious to the point where
it has, yes.
And of course, by the time we we're recording this now on a certain date. By the time we drop this episode, it could have developed even more. I mean, there could be a coup and he could be the governor now. So who knows what the future may hold. But as we're talking, as we're recording, there's been a lot of things going on. Apparently the state ordered him to shut down, and state troopers came and basically,
They pulled his license too.
yeah, now his license has been pulled. The Michigan militia showed up to protect him. So Menke's quote about the Michigan militia being there was, "As long as they didn't pull a gun on anyone and shoot anyone in the leg, I don't care."
As long as they didn't pull a gun on anyone and shoot anyone in the leg. I mean, chest shots, head shots, anything else, fine. Just not the leg.
Shoot to maim, not to kill, I always say. But then he says, those guys have just as much rights as the rest of us do. They were demonstrating their rights. They were behaving themselves. And it goes on to say that they were ready to block the door if police showed up, which
kind of is doing something then.
right.
That's involving yourself quite physically at that point.
That's not, I wouldn't call that behaving myself. I mean,
yeah, stopping the police from doing their job is not demonstrating your rights.
Right, exactly. Unless
you're just shooting people in the leg. Menke also goes on to borrow a phrase from former President Ronald Reagan to sum up the situation. "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." Menke says, "Those are the words I fear more than anything else. I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." You fear those words more than anything else? Not lice outbreak. You'd think that would scare a barber more.
I would fear more, "I'm going to the barber shop and I'll be back unless I get shot in the leg." I think I would be more afraid of that one.
I'd be more afraid of, "Jesus is here and he's mad." I think that might be more startling than anything.
So yeah, he's still being very defiant, and he actually had a press conference one day, and in the press conference he had a few interesting things to say, and here's a few quotes from the press conference. He said, quote, "There's an old serenity prayer that says, 'God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.' And I took the courage part of that and I worked with that."
Because wisdom, right out the window. Wisdom, courage, or serenity? Nope, courage. I'm not thinking about nothing. However, with his little career as a self-published author, he added an extra line to that poem. "God grant me serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference, and a literary agent to spot grammatical mistakes."
And then he added, "Here's another one you may remember. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Michigan militia my shop to keep."
He's doing all the greatest hits.
"If you get shot in the leg before I wake, oh well, it was just a mistake."
Oh man, he did all the hits.
He did. Then he says, quote, "I've never looked for a handout and I don't even know what they are." Well, he's about to find out because somebody has set up a GoFundMe page for him, and on the GoFundMe page it says he knows about it and is accepting the money. And so far, as of right now, they've raised $29,000 for him.
I've never looked for a handout. I don't even know what they are. I don't know what GoFundMe is either. Is it like Kickstarter? Because I'll take that.
And then he went on to say, "I've lived through 14 different administrations, and I've never seen this type of oppression by a government ever." Well, the guy's 77 years old. So he was alive when Japanese Americans were interned in camps. He was alive during segregation. I don't know if having people take health precautions because of a pandemic is more oppressive than any of those things, but what do I know?
Well, like most people, they weren't oppressive to him because they weren't oppressing him. There's nothing in there that says that barbers had to stay in camps.
Right. Well, I guess that's the important thing. Yeah. So,
And then he ended it with, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest. And if you're mad about this whole thing, I'm sorry. I apologize."
yeah. Well, he's an interesting guy. And he's created a lot of attention for Owosso, Michigan.
Maybe not the right attention, but definitely putting Owosso on the map. As long as he isn't quoted in an interview as saying that Owosso is a smelly little town, he might do okay.
So all of this attention led me to look at his Facebook page. It's interesting to get glimpses into his life pre all of this controversy.
Back when he was just a humble barber, writing stories out of his mind.
Right. Exactly. We go to August 5th, 2017, where he wrote, "Right now I feel as lonely as a Maytag repairman. I got the polkas going and no hair to cut. It almost feels blasphemous."
Oh, what? Polka music with no hair to cut is blasphemy?
Well, no wonder he's nervous about Jesus coming back.
I was just going to say, what's he going to think 3 years later?
And then June 9th, 2017. This does give us some proof that he didn't set up the GoFundMe page himself, but he wrote, "I wish I knew more about these computers. Someone informed me I have a website listing my barbershop hours and my rating. Maybe somebody can tell me what that's all about."
What's this, internet? What? You mean people can go on a computer and know when I'm open? I didn't put that up there.
June 7th, 2017, he announces one of his new books in a kind of an interesting way. He says, "I'm happy to announce my latest novel, The Adventures of Railcar Rogues, a Murder Mystery, is going to print. This experience is the closest I'll ever get to giving birth."
Where is this book coming from?
I know. What does he do with these? How do the books start then? I mean, I know where books come from, I thought, but
Well, Matt, when a printing press and a tree love each other very, very much,
or when a barber is listening to polkas an awful lot.
it gets real lonely.
On June 3rd, 2017, he remembers a moment from nearly 40 years ago and recounts it this way. Quote, "It's an instance of male heroism that has been related to me through a client while getting his hair cut.
Oh, so now we know where he's getting all his ideas from. He's using his clients. This is why he can't be closed right now, Matt, because the imagination mill is shut down. He doesn't care about cutting hair. He's just got nothing to write about right now.
The beer tent had just begun its beginnings." And begun is spelled Bugun.
He wrote it in accent. It's begun.
So the beer tent had just begun its beginnings. The sports boosters were in charge of the 10 p.m. till closing that night. Oh, let me write that in my shift book so I know exactly. When their shift finally came to a finish, they were confronted with a problem. A rather good-looking young woman had passed out and was found laying across a pallet used to hold a beer keg. Pallet is spelled P-A-L-A-T-E, so it's like the one in your mouth.
A pallet used to hold a beer keg? Whose mouth is that big?
And I've just got a whole different image in my head than I think what he was trying to do. It's like a Warner Brothers cartoon all of a sudden.
This is a problem.
The 5 men looked at one another, not sure of their next move. Someone finally took the lead and woke the poor woman. She immediately informed them she needed to use a porta potty. Use is in there twice.
Well, she really had to go.
Since there were at least a dozen lining the riverbank, and no one kept track which of them she had entered, it immediately presented another problem. She didn't come out. No one...
Gosh. What kind of a story is it? It's like a Benny Hill episode. Like, whoa, what porta-john is she in? All 5 of us, nobody kept an eye on her. She's in one of them. This is a big problem. Is
She
it?
was in that...
Is it?
A minute ago, she was across that beer keg in the roof of my mouth. Now I don't know where she is.
Man, there's got to be at least a dozen of these things. It's going to take seconds to check them all. We'll be here all night.
Wanting to go home and getting more and more exasperated, and after knocking on each of the doors, they finally came on the plan to just begin opening them.
This is the story of the 5 brightest guys in Owosso. They knocked on all 12. You in there? You in there? You in there? You in there? I don't know what we're going to do. And then the most timid one of the group that they never listened to raised his hand. We could open them. Well, gall darn it, Timmy. About time you spoke up.
See, I like your version of it. You could write a book about this. What happened next was totally unexpected.
They found her.
With her head resting against the door, pantyhose and jeans all rolled down her ankles, she rolled out in a heap. The guys became even more flustered as she attacked any attempts to correct her situation. In her own struggles to rectify her footing, she tumbled down the riverbank with 5 men after her, hell-bent on keeping her from drowning.
Well, now they got a fire under them, huh?
Yeah.
Before, they were all perplexed at the 12 porta-johns, but now they see a problem they can correct.
After abandoning any attempt at modesty, they finally dragged her back up the bank and managed to get her dressed and deposited her at her front door.
Do you got to fill out a slip for that?
He says, I know I'll use this story somewhere, so watch for it in a coming attraction. That's the entire story, Eric. It's a girl was drunk, and her pants were down, and they found her in a porta-john and took her home. And
But that was a story of male heroism.
yes, male heroism.
What's the heroic part of this?
Oh, those guys were heroes. Knocking on porta-john doors, putting a beer keg in their mouth. Oh, man, those guys were the best.
This is going in my next book. It's a whole paragraph of entertainment.
And the fact that he remembered this 40 years after he was told it. I mean, if somebody would have told me that, I'm like, yeah, well, that's Bay City on a Tuesday. But I've been like, big deal. I don't, but boy, that story really made an impression with him. So,
Because it's so heroic.
I mean, they didn't shoot her in the leg or anything.
Oh, they behaved themselves all right.
And this post that he made on May 30th, 2017, I think maybe this explains what this whole thing is about. He says, when I have a pause in haircutting, I let my mind run wild. This is a dangerous time in the lives of us humanoids.
That line right there makes me think he's not human.
I've seen it result in people whose only qualification to run for political office is that they have too much time on their hands. So if you suspect I may have more time on my hands than I need, stop in for a haircut or suffer the consequences. Sheriff Karl Manke. It has a nice ring.
Come get your haircut, or I could be your next sheriff. Although, when he has a pause in haircutting, he lets his mind run wild, and that's what he thought about. Maybe I should run for office. Is that running wild? The humanoids line was wilder than that. Guess what, Carl? Anything you want to do, go crazy. I'll run for sheriff. Okay. Okay. You till your heart's content, buddy. Just let your mind run wild. First thing I do is permit militia shootings in the leg.
They're not hurting anybody.
Who knows? Maybe one of the updates on this could be is he does run for office.
Speaking of running for office, our friend Sarah from Back in Black Photography alerted me to this. Portland, Oregon is in the process of having a mayoral election. But when I used to live in Oregon, and every year at election time they would send out a voter pamphlet with information on all the candidates. And those voter pamphlets were very helpful in getting to know who you were voting for. And in Oregon they have a great vote by mail system. It was a great way to participate. You'd get your voter guide, you'd sit down with your ballot, and you'd think about who you were going to vote for. So she sent me something from the recent voter guide, a man who is running for mayor of Portland, Oregon. His name is Cash Blanco Carter. His occupation includes screenwriter, stand-up comedian, and Amazon warehouse associate.
Wait a minute. That's 3 jobs. At least one of those is a hobby.
At least 2 of those are probably a hobby. His motto is, when change is needed, invest in cash, because that's his first name.
Oh. I guarantee that's how he ends every one of his stand-up sets. I guarantee it.
Yep. At the end of the profile, he did something a little different. He has somebody else talking about him. And it's not even an endorsement, just her feelings. Her name is Susan Anglada Bartley. She's an activist, writer, and teacher from Portland. And he had her write her thoughts about what she thinks are his attitudes about a few topics.
This is convoluted.
The first topic is the police. Mr. Carter did not express an anti-police stance. He did not express any statements related to police abolition. I got the feeling that he values the role that police play. Well, that's pretty definitive. I just got a vague, funny feeling that he's okay with the police.
So all the other candidates write their own platforms and what they stand for and what they believe and who they are. And this guy decided to say, no, you tell him what I think.
Right.
That's like if I wanted to run for office and I said, no, Matt, you tell him how great I am.
And I would say, when it comes to Social Security, Eric didn't say anything bad about it. Didn't say he wants to cut it. I think he likes it. Got that feeling. We've never actually talked about Social Security, though.
Well, see, now I'm curious. What does Susan Anglada Bartley think that Cash thinks about the arts?
Mr. Carter expressed a passion for music and the arts. He mentioned wanting to promote more public concerts and music events. The way he answered made me think that he would like to be a leader who works toward greater civic engagement in a way that Portlanders would really enjoy.
This is so confusing. The way he answered made me think that he would like... Why isn't he speaking for himself? He's a stand-up comic and he can't...
Maybe he brings her to his stand-up comedy gigs. Maybe it's like, I think he's funny. The way he said some things before the show, made me think he would be really good at this.
When he says knock, knock, I think he wants you to say who's there. And then I think he's going to continue when he asks, why did the chicken cross the road? I think he's genuinely concerned for the chicken. Last but not least, how did she feel in the presence of this candidate? This is really in the voter guide. You're reading what somebody else's opinion is of this guy.
Yeah, and I'm glad they covered the three most important things: his stance on policing, the arts, and how he makes you feel in his presence. And how does he make you feel in his presence? Well, Susan Anglada Bartley says, Cash Carter seems really cool. I got the feeling that he is a highly motivated person who does not want to be underestimated. Well, that's a lot of us.
No, I want people to underestimate me, Matt.
I got a sense that he is proud of his working class roots. I also got the sense that he loves the Portland Trail Blazers from the emblem on his hat.
She's using clues now. She has so little to say. She's just like, and he was wearing a Trailblazers hat, so I guess he likes basketball.
Boy, she is like Sherlock Holmes. It's like, and she put this in the voter guide thinking, yeah, people really like that I wear a Trailblazers hat because it is Portland. He seems like a guy who could get along with anyone, which is important for a mayor. He's open-minded and on-the-spot creative. January 22nd, 2020.
He's so on the spot creative, he had me write this.
But when I lived out there, I loved the voter guides because there were some really interesting profiles you'd come across. And there's one, when I lived there in 2012, a 19-year-old guy was running for mayor named Max Brum. And I saved his profile. He wrote, "The politicians who have been running Portland for so long will argue that I am too young and inexperienced to run Portland. It's a knee-jerk response, but what would you expect from jerks who have brought Portland to its knees?"
Now, see, that's the kind of creative wordplay that Cash Carter needs.
Right, if Cash Carter was having it, it'd be like, I get the feeling that Max Brum thinks that people think that he might be too young. Get the feeling that he is kind of young. I get that feeling from the way he dresses and the music he listens to.
I do love the Yoda speak here.
Uh-huh.
It's a knee-jerk response. What would you expect from jerks who brought Portland to its knees?
Max Brum goes on to say that civic leaders in Portland take their orders from developers and power elite like waiters take a dinner order. The only difference is, instead of name tags, these leaders come with price tags.
Oh, see? More Yoda speak. This is brilliant. I'm guessing he won.
Don't think he did.
I'm sure he didn't, Matt.
I don't think so.
We would have heard about the 19-year-old mayor.
Right. He goes on to say, don't get me wrong, if you overlooked a $16 trillion debt, the loss of personal liberties, and the need for military adventure, the adult generation has done a pretty good job. But you don't hear that often. A candidate for office saying, this adult generation.
Sarcasm much, Max?
Okay, that's not true. If this generation screwed things up any worse, the Earth would spin backwards and the moon would be in the pawn shop.
All right, now you're getting carried away. You sound like a barber in between haircuts, just letting your mind run wild, buddy. Let's rein it in here.
At the end, there is one little quote from somebody who is endorsing him. It says, there's a lot to be said for the 19-year-old candidate who tells it like it is. So he's got our endorsement. We're voting for Max Brum. Seriously.
That slays me right there. We're voting for Max Brum. Seriously. Before anybody even asked, are you serious? Seriously.
No, we're not joking.
I know it sounds like a lark, but this is really where we're putting our vote. Seriously.
Seriously. And there was another guy who ran that year. He does go on to give some background about himself, and what he says is, my background is in sales, firefighting, real estate broker, former educator, union actor, screen and book writer, to dad of a future soccer superstar like Messi and the other greats.
Well, who wouldn't want that as the mayor of Portland? With a background in sales, firefighting, real estate broker? And I'm going to be the dad of a future soccer superstar because I can see the future and I'm putting way too much pressure on my son.
Just like my dad did, because he also was in sales, firefighting, real estate, former educator,
Astronaut, pediatrician, gynecologist, architect. I'm just going through a book now.
Just got done talking to a high school counselor, and
I should have had somebody else write this. Well, I got into politics myself, Matt.
oh,
Yes, back in 1986 when I was in fourth grade. Very young, idealistic little Star Wars fan that I was.
ran for class president, did you?
One better than that, Matt.
Oh,
Me and a small group of us were selected to write a letter to President Reagan.
oh,
Because this was during the Libyan crisis.
uh-huh.
Yeah, and apparently we'd bombed them because they had bombed somebody else at a embassy.
Spoken like a history teacher. Apparently we bombed them.
I was in fourth grade, Matt, and I still am, I guess. But I found this letter. I was going through old files, and I found this letter that the seven of us wrote to President Reagan. It's 1986. Dear President Reagan, we are writing to share our feelings about the Libyan crisis and to advise you of the conflict management skills we have learned.
And Ronald Reagan was, oh good, the letter from the fourth graders came.
Exactly.
Get Secretary Schultz on the phone. Gotta tell him what they said.
We feel that Libya deserved to be punished for its part in terrorism, but that bombing was not the proper punishment. As children, we are scared that we are going to get into the middle of World War III and die. Laying it on a little thick, I think. Oh, it's got scared kids out there. Better
Dear
reconsider.
Mr. President, what we think you should do instead is just shoot them in the leg.
Actually, we said, we think you should talk to Gaddafi like you do to Gorbachev. I don't know what that means. Like, you know, how you're kind of sweet with him. I don't know what that means. Other ways to solve conflicts that we have learned this year are negotiating, compromise, active listening, threat-free explanation, soliciting intervention, apologizing, and sharing. I don't know how sharing helps solve conflicts. It's like, you know, well, you got to understand, Gaddafi, I'm under a lot of pressure here. Oh, I'm under a lot of pressure too.
Here, have my pen. So you wrote President Reagan a letter about negotiating, apologizing, sharing. Shouldn't you send this letter to President Trump? It might do more good now than it did in 1986.
I should just photocopy this. Just white out Reagan and put Trump. White out Libyan crisis and just put COVID-19.
We've learned basic human decency and we'd like to talk to you about it.
Well, here, actually, this next line probably is more applicable because we did go on to explain to President Reagan, we have learned that flight, tattling, and violence are not appropriate or useful. Tattling? It continues and then ends with, perhaps we could someday exchange visitors like has been done with Russia. I don't know what that means. I'm sure there were ambassadors back then. Thank you for taking the time to read our letter. We hope it will help you with your job as president. We would like to hear what you think about our ideas. Signed, all of us.
And did you hear?
We did. We got a letter back from the White House.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I can actually hear this in Reagan's voice. This is not from Reagan. It's from his special assistant to the president and director of correspondence, Ann Higgins.
Okay.
But I still hear it in President Reagan's voice. Dear young friend. Dear young friend.
This is how he addressed his grandchildren.
Dear young friend, the president has asked me to thank you for writing to him about America's recent military action against Libyan installations that support terrorism. As you know, the United States has for over 5 years tried to persuade the Libyan dictator to stop supporting, aiding, and directing those who commit acts of terrorism against American citizens and others. The president has never tattled on Gaddafi.
No, it doesn't. Does it really?
No. But I wished it did. I really wish.
The president has only tattled once, and that was the time that George Bush broke that vase that was given to us by the Greek ambassador.
I saw Bush monkeying with it. No, it's actually a very dry, bland kind of response. It just says, we tried diplomacy, it didn't work. And then I did like this line because now I see them, nudging their own agenda here. I'm sure you agree that the first duty of any government is to protect the lives and property of its citizens. Like giving us an argument that we couldn't possibly go against, right?
Protecting the lives of its citizens? But what if they have a barber shop to run?
Then that's out the window.
Forget it then.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd agree, right, fourth graders? Yeah.
Nudge, nudge.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Anne. I got
I
it.
would have liked if she would have shared the things that she learned in fourth grade. We learned about where Iceland is, and we read a story about a very curious possum.
Yeah, it ends with the president hopes and prays that our recent use of military force against Libya's terrorist-related installations will deter the Libyan government and others from further acts of terrorism that would certainly save the lives of many innocent people. Thank you again for letting the president know your opinion. Best wishes, Anne.
And this is how Eric changed the world in 1986. Because you never hear about Libya anymore, so...
That's true. Not
Eric
after
did solve the crisis.
after we wrote our letter.
Bunch of fourth graders at a small Lutheran school in the middle of Saginaw, Michigan. They took charge.
Actually, this one was written in my fourth grade year when I was still at a public school.
Oh, well, either way, it's impressive.
I just love that we put in there, we told the President of the United States that we have learned that tattling is not appropriate or useful.
Well, again, somebody needs to tell this president.
I got the whiteout right here, Matt. I'm picturing kids right now. Can we write a letter to the president? It's not gonna work, kids. It's not gonna work like it did in the 80s.
No. Can we tweet to the president? It's a little different.
Can we create a Twitter account?
Tattling is dumb, Mr. President. And then within hours, the president tweets, "At little Jimmy Johnson of Ames, Iowa, I'm rubber, you're glue, loser, so sad. And then in 30 years, that kid's going to have a podcast like, I still have my tweet from the president. I don't think it was written by his secretary.
Oh, well, I think I'm spent.
I think it's a good time to say au revoir.
Let's do it, man.
All right.
So all you folks out there in listener land, be sure to like us on Facebook, find us on Podbean, find us on iTunes, find us on the YouTubes. Be sure to tell all your friends about us.
Yes, and even tell your enemies.
Yes, and get this to Betty White and Madonna.
And, well, maybe not so much the president.
Maybe.
Eric and Matt, I'm rubber, you're glue. I'm going to tell on you.
So for everything, anything, and nothing really, I'm Eric.
I'm Matt.
And we'll see you next week.
Tell me why I had to go. Why don't you tell me why it just ain't so? Why don't you tell me why it hurts so bad? Why don't you tell me why you're not sad?
Which porta potty did she go in?
I don't know, man. There's like 12 of them.
We'll never find her.